Hey guys, and welcome. I am Morgan Guest McDonald, founder, CEO of Paper Raven Books, and I have with us today author Deirdre Fay, author of Becoming Safely Embodied. Thanks for being here, Deirdre.
So glad and so grateful to be with you.
It's an epic day.
Epic day. The book is out. Yay. So glad.
Safely Embodied. This book is shooting up the charts. We were just talking about how you're hitting number one in all the self-help categories, including self-help itself, the big giant category. And you've got reviews just like pouring in from around the world. And it's amazing to see the level of impact that this book is already having. And for you guys who are joining us, you can get a free copy of the ebook today. Go to paperravenbooks.com/becoming safely embodied. You can check it out for free today. And Deirdre, I'd love to know, like, who is this book for? Who did you write this book for?
Well, it's really based on my own experience, because when I, years ago, I don't even remember, 30 some odd year, 40 years ago, I was living in an ashram, yoga ashram, and doing meditation and yoga every day intensively. And during that time, in that safe cocoon, my own trauma history came up. And I was like, I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden I went from that intensive practice. Also, I was training for triathlons at that time. So I was in my body a lot, to suddenly not be able to do anything. And I was like, what happened to me, and how do I reclaim myself? So then what happened is I left the ashram. I got my training as a social worker, and then I was working in one of the big major hospitals in Boston, working on the dissociative unit with people who are really severely traumatized. And Bessel van der Kolk, who's a luminary in our field, heard about the work I was doing and asked me to join his team. And it was while I was there that I started putting together this group teaching these skills, and I called it Becoming Safely Embodied. Like, how do you step by step actually come home to yourself? And that was the genesis. And then over time that grew and grew and grew. And my colleague and friend Janina Fisher, who's just amazing herself, would send her clients, and her clients would get better faster. And she was like, what's going on? And so she started co-leading the groups with me, because she wanted to know what I was doing and how she could train in it and learn. And so we did that for years. And then, I started putting it online, because I just wanted to help as many people as I want. I remembered what it was like to be stuck and trapped in my own awfulness. And I thought, I don't want that to be for anybody anymore. I want to help people move along faster. No, they're not stuck. And it's become really clear to me that that trauma is not something that's supposed to grind us into the ground and make us feel terrible for the rest of our lives. It's really a modern day compassion training, so that we can learn the step-by-step process to open our heart and transform our suffering into compassion. So I'm totally about that.
I love that you took a painful experience of suffering, you cracked it wide open, and you were like, not only how can I learn from this, but how can I help other people learn from this? This is your life's work, isn't it?
Right, totally. And that's why I wanted to do the free book that we're doing for right now, is because if I can reach as many people as possible and help them, it's kind of like what happens now that I'm of a certain age. It's like, I just want to give back. It's more than anything else. Is how can I help? What can I do? And this is a simple way to do it. And I'm really, really glad to do it. And it moves me to tears to read the reviews. And I could start crying now, to see people just so appreciative. And I have to say, Morgan, you've taught me so much about how to do this and make it available to people. And so I can talk endlessly about your gifts.
Well, thank you. It's been a really fun journey. We've loved being on the journey for this book. You've already done so much. We're going to get to that in just a minute. for folks who are hanging in there with us and they're like, okay, Morgan, okay, Deirdre, this sounds interesting. Becoming Safely Embodied. I'm curious about trauma and healing and feeling safe in my own body. And I'm kind of thinking about the ebook, and maybe I'm going to go to paperravenbooks.com/becoming safely embodied and check it out. And I'm wondering, like, you say the word trauma, and we've talked about, you and I off camera, we've talked about trauma before. And I think, I'm a good example of someone who I maybe have experienced suffering and things like that, but I don't know whether the term trauma applies to me. How do people know whether they might have some sort of either episodic or chronic or lower level trauma?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I started just thinking about it. It's more like people who've had a crummy history that you feel like you just can't move beyond, or like you want more, like it's part of our native experience. You have kids, it, like kids just always want to keep exploring. They want more. But if some inhibition stops them, they start internalizing that and they make that about themselves. And that's what I began to realize. That's why trauma, whatever it is, doesn't heal, is because of these underlying attachment needs. And so it's almost like, don't worry about the title. Don't worry about what you have. You don't diagnose yourself. It's just like, where do you feel stopped? Where are triggers too big for you to feel like you can move through? And how do you organize yourself inside so that when something crummy happens, when you get triggered, and we're all going to get triggered as much as we hate it, that we don't drop to the, out of our body and out of our lives, that we have a platform inside. The elevator doesn't crash through the bottom. It has some place to stop so we can rebound, have some resilience, and move forward.
I love that. And I love that you said, like, don't worry about self-diagnosing. like if we've
all done too much of that.
For sure. So like that feeling of like crumminess, it's just not going my way. I'm feeling triggered. I'm kind of upset. Like, I don't know my way forward, and all of that. I mean, might or might not be sort of rooted in trauma, and you can move forward. And what I love about your book is that it's so practical. It is so practical, Deirdre. You've done this amazing job of blending everything that you've learned from yoga, psychotherapy, like all of these, meditation, all of these deeply rooted, really theories, frameworks, methodologies. And you've brought into our lives, like how we can do it, which is phenomenal.
There's a Stanford psychologist that talks about the need for micro commitments, these small, tiny steps. It's also in all the attachment theory research. It's like, how do you, with a child or an adult, make something so small and so simple that the next step is like, oh, sure. Because otherwise, if we try to take too much, all our fears, blocks, and resistance come up. And so what I knew, I did it almost intuitively, maybe because I needed it, and nobody had done that for me, is how do I take this and make it so simple that I can be successful at it? And then the next one, be successful. And then it's like, aha, okay. And then it's easier to step forward.
What's one of the practices that is either, very close to your heart, or maybe you've gotten a lot of feedback on, people like, oh, this thing that I'm doing now because I learned it from you, Deirdre? Is there anything that kind of comes to mind?
Oh my gosh, let me think about that. Well, I know that so many people have gotten the value and a sense of, I'm not sure where, is a place of belonging. We talk a lot about that skill of belonging. And we all need to belong to something, somewhere, somehow. But we get lost from that. We get disconnected. And when we can land inside ourselves and connect with ourselves inside, it can make a huge difference. Okay, I could go down that road a lot. Probably one of the simplest skills that people find value of is a skill called separating facts from feelings. And we confuse facts with all the stories that we tell. And a simple example of this was, I was taking a workshop myself, training and getting better at something. And somebody in one of my courses just had taken the Becoming Safely Embodied group. And she was, I'd never met her. She was actually in Scotland. And she started emailing me about how upset she was. And the first email was like, then it became 10 emails. By the lunch came by, there were so many emails, and they were just endless words, without punctuation, without any sentence structure, whatever. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then I looked at lunch, there was even more. And then after, at the end of the day, she started writing and having punctuation and sentence structure, and they were shorter and concise. And she said, basically what she did is she separated out the facts from the story that she had about those facts and how it was all enveloped in her history. And she did that on her own. She didn't need me to coach her. She didn't need anybody else coaching. She just organized herself inside and landed and was able to change her relationship with herself and her relationship with this other person that was so triggering to her. That was like, whoa.
And you didn't do anything, right? Because she was already going through the material. So she was.
I wrote her at the end of the day and said, oh my God, that's outrageous. But no.
And I think, it's so I get those emails as, someone who helps people with books. I get deluge emails and lots of words. And even if we don't write lots of words, let's say in an email, we think. It's like we think without punctuation. It's just like endless, like run-on sentence. And it's often of like negative things. Why is this happening to me? Why do I feel this way? This endless, just like rush of thoughts with no commas and no periods and no real solution. And so what that's like an analogy. Her email chain is like an analogy for what's already happening in our own brains, even if it's just thoughts. And when we can introduce kind of fact from fiction, you're sort of saying that we can, I'm almost imagining like a line break is like a breath. Like we could just take a breath and we can start to feel like, wait, this is not a runaway train.
You're saying it so well, Morgan, because it's like the tsunami comes over us and we feel like we can't stop it. And what people have repeatedly said to me is these skills help them slow down so that then they can make choices. So rather than being triggered and reactive, they actually shift that and can respond in the way they want. That's amazing.
It is amazing. And what a beautiful time for this book to come out. We've all been through 2020 and the lockdowns. Many of us are still in some sort of restricted or lockdown area. We're still kind of waiting for vaccines and opening up and all these things to do with COVID-19. And so I feel like so many of us, it was such a dramatic and drastic change that we were all triggered, or many of us were triggered into the rush of thoughts and feeling like we didn't have choices in our lives anymore. What do you think, like now that we've lived through 2020 together and this book is coming out in 2021, what do you really hope that this book brings to people who read it?
Is a way forward, that you don't have to stay stuck, that there's simple ways that you can organize yourself inside so that you can be connected to yourself, trust your inner guidance, so that you can take that next step and the next step and the next step after that. And you will. I mean, this is the beauty, is if we're connected in here to our own inner source, God, whatever abiding energy that you call that when you're connected there, you are being led from within. And there's a wisdom that's always guiding us. And to me, that's worth everything.
Abiding energy. Oh, I love that, Deirdre. That is... Keep that. So guys, if you're interested, grab a free copy today, like right now, while you're here and thinking about it.
While it's still available for free.
paperravenbooks.com/becoming safely embodied. It's linked up next to this video, and we'd love for you to get your free copy today. Even if you don't have time to read it till the weekend or whatever, just go ahead and get it today while it's available. And Deirdre, people are often curious, like, what was it like to write the book? And I'd love to know. So this is a book that really encapsulates a lot of your work over your career, and it's not your first book. So I'm curious, like, when did you know that you were going to write this book, the Becoming Safely Embodied book?
Oh, that's so good. I don't know. I can't answer when, but what I knew was I really wanted to help more people. And it was that simple. And it's like, how could I do that? My first two books were more professionally oriented. The first book, it was a skills manual based on some of this material, and it was we self-published that. And then one of the big names publishers asked me to write a book for them, which I did. And so I had that experience of working with a big name publisher and getting the narcissistic joy of having somebody say, oh yeah, well, we'd like you to write for us. And then this time I knew I wanted more authority around it, more agency. And I wanted to help more people and know that I could help people the more they read it. And so, which is why we're doing the free book. And if you're with a traditional publisher, you don't have that choice. They don't do that. And I was like, well, that's what I chose. So that's part of the reason we hooked up with you, Morgan, is I knew I wanted a way to help as many people as I could.
Yeah. So when you think about self-publishing, traditional, and then kind of working with us, with a team who can, it's self-publishing, but it's like, visible self-publishing. What would you say to anyone who's sort of looking at the options? Like, what do you wish you had known about the publishing industry before you kind of went through all these trials and tribulations?
Well, what I really got clear on is that there's a real science behind publishing, which I didn't know about, and I can't know about, the metadata. What the heck? I still don't even know what that is. All these pieces of the puzzle I didn't have the time to dive into. And of course, all of us have this fantasy. I'll just write, pour my heart out, and then people will buy it, want it, see it. And that's just not true. If the publisher isn't behind the book in a big way, or you're not spending a PR budget, there's just no way to get the book out there in front of people so that they can read it and develop it and see it. And so I guess what I've learned the most is to use the experts out there, that people who know more than I do. And you're them, Morgan. You're the one.
Well, thank you, Deirdre. It's been really fun putting this book out with you, and I think partly because it is your third book. It's a huge bringing together of so much of your wisdom and experience and what you've seen work for other people. And it really feels like a culmination for you in a lot of ways. And it's really fun to see it out in the marketplace, getting the reviews, getting the visibility. It's a different kind of validation, right? It's not like, oh, please come write for us. It's like, oh, we put this out and people are responding. They are grateful. They are really
grateful. It's breathtaking. The first couple of days I was lightheaded. I was like, whoa, and just so glad that people don't have to stay stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was it like in the actual writing process? Like, because I'm gonna come back to this a little bit, because we've got a whole community of writers and people are like, I want to know what it's like to write a book. I think there's a particular challenge when you're trying to bring together 3 decades plus of work and experience and client stories and all these things. When you sat down to write, did you have an outline you were working from, or did it just sort of pour out because you're so familiar with teaching the material and that kind of thing?
That's a good question. I did have an outline. I knew where I wanted to go with it, and that made a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. That made a big difference. What I'm just thinking about right now is, I just heard from somebody today, and they said, and I hope you don't mind my saying this, but on page X, I don't remember what page, there's a typo. It's instead of TOO, you had TO. And I was like, oh my God, how do we catalog all this? All the people that we had read, professional proofreaders, professional people reading this manuscript, and no fault, no blame here, but just the little errors that are in there. We should have a game or something, who can find the most errors in the book. But that was a big thing that I realized too. It's you can't get it right the first time, even the first edition. You just have to come back and do it again, and don't feel bad when there's errors in there.
That's actually a great point, especially for those of us who have not published a book. We put a published book on such a platform. Like, it is this perfect, polished, extraordinary thing. And those of us who've been through that messy part of writing and revising and proofreading and formatting and proofreading again, like we've seen that in the process, it might look like a nice, pretty 50,000 or 60,000 words now, but like most of those words were changed, moved around, taken out, new ones put in. So many changes happen over the months of not only writing, but revising and, editing and that sort of thing. So most people don't realize that what you experience as like writing the first draft, it over time becomes something different because there are so many changes to it. And at some point you have to kick it out the door and be like, okay, it's done. Like, we've got to get it out. And then, certainly within our team, a common expectation, something we plan for is during launch or during advanced review copies. So those usually go out before the book launch. And then during book launch, and then even, a little bit after book launch, we will gather up the list of things to change. And then we'll do one big sort of revision of the PDF file and re-upload everything again, so that anyone who buys the book after that 30-day period, well, at least we've caught most of the stuff.
That's a great idea. We're going to do that.
Yeah. Totally. So a word of encouragement to everyone who's like, but it looks so messy when it's on my computer. It's like, yes, it does. And that's okay.
So you said something really important is just to get it out there. Do the best you can. There's parts of me that feel like, oh, it's not quite good enough. I should have this, I should have that. And oh my gosh. But then I see what people get out of it. I'm like, that's the most important thing. And so we have a gift. You have a gift. It's so important to share that gift rather than constraining it and waiting for the perfect moment. It may never be there. I don't know if there's anyone who ever did a perfect anything. So do it. Just do it and try it. You can always change it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the benefit of going with more of your non-traditional publishers. You have that flexibility.
Yeah. You haven't ordered 10,000 copies of the book that are sitting in a warehouse or being distributed to Barnes and Nobles. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Deirdre, so you're middle of this launch, so a lot is still happening. You're still processing a lot of emotions and reviews. Every time I check your book, there's more reviews. We're up to like 43 reviews, and like every day there's more and more and more. So I think that's going to be really fun to continue to see the just growing response to your book. And so just acknowledging you're still in the middle of it, but you've learned a lot. You've grown so much through even this third book process. Is there anything that you would want to tell a younger version of yourself? And I'll let you think about how young you want to go back. You can go back to like last year in the middle of the first COVID lockdown, or you can go all the way back to like as far back as you want to go. But just thinking about what you've learned about becoming an author, especially, and what this process has been like for you. Is there anything that you would want to tell a younger version of yourself?
To just put it out there, to trust. And what a painful thing that is for us. We don't trust. Hard for me. And yet if I didn't put this out there, I wouldn't know in the same way the value that this is doing. And the other piece probably is, having been in pain and suffering in my life, is to realize like, that is the mud out of which our gift grows. And to never doubt that. And sometimes I feel like, oh, I wish it had happened when I was younger. And it's like, it's taken me this long to bring it all together. And there's even more. I have another book in me that I'm planning that's going to come out. And so just do it. Just trust your life and trust that all is meant to come forward. And I probably wish I had that kind of support and encouragement, which you give so freely, Morgan. It's amazing working with you. So those of you guys who are wanting to write something, get a mentor like Morgan. Really, it's worth it. Especially if we didn't have it. I had well-meaning parents, but they didn't know how to motivate and encourage and support and inspire me or value the gifts that were uniquely mine. And when you have somebody like Morgan on your side who wants to see the best in you, that's amazing. In fact, that's one of the 7 fundamental attachment needs that I teach that people need, is to have that kind of mentoring and guidance. So do what you can to get that, and that will serve you well.
Words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Deirdre. Thank you for being courageous. Thank you for trusting yourself. Thank you for getting this book out into the world when I'm sure you felt very uncertain about whether this was the right time. Is it ready? And all of those things. And just thank you for putting it out there and for being with us here today too.
Oh, thank you, Morgan, for everything.
Yeah. Alrighty, guys. Don't forget, grab your copy of the book today. paperravenbooks.com/becoming safely embodied. You can get a free copy today while you're here and while you're thinking about it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Deirdre. We'll see you all next time.
My pleasure.